Yo, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of the SWAS NFL Sunday, Week 14. As I'm recording this, I am getting beat 38-3 in the Miami of Ohio game. It actually just ended. So bad bet there. I did get the Arizona State-Iowa State over, but I also sprinkled Iowa State a little bit. So not a great start to the Saturday. But hopefully, by the time you're watching this, things have gotten better. So yeah, NFL Sunday, Week 14. Let's do it. First up, we got Jets on the road in Miami. The Dolphins are laying 6 points at home here. Total sitting at 44.5, pretty much across the board. Let's take a look at the pie charts, and according to the data, action's coming in, sort of on the Miami side. Over 65% of the tickets, about 60% of the money. As I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So let's get into this matchup, and we'll start with some trends. The Jets have struggled against the Dolphins. Miami is 13-3 straight up in their last 16 matchups against the Jets. 11-3-2 against the number, and specifically at home in Miami, 8 in a row. 8-0 straight up in their last 8 games against the Jets at home. 5-1-2 against the number. So if you've been betting the Dolphins blindly in this Dolphins-Jets division rivalry, you are doing quite well. So will that trend continue here? Let's take a look at the matchup for the Jets offense. Obviously, Miami's defense should have the edge here. 10th in yards per play, 13th in success rate. The Jets offense, as I'm sure you know if you own a TV or a smartphone, not living up to the hype this year. 25th in yards per play, 20th in success rate. The Jets offense also has some injury issues here. Breece Hall has just been ruled out. That just happened a few hours ago. So they're not going to have Breece Hall in this game. Allen Lazard is back, so that's good news. Rodgers was connecting with him earlier in the season. Tyron Smith is out. Fashanu, who is their 6th offensive lineman, who would be starting in Tyron Smith's spot, he's questionable. Vera Tucker's questionable. Morgan Moses is questionable. This is just a sad situation here with the Jets offense. Now, the good news is all 3 of those offensive linemen who are listed as questionable, they all did participate in practice on Friday. So maybe the Jets are going to be at full strength here with the exception of Tyron Smith on the offensive line. But it's tough to say. They're all currently listed as questionable. And they're going to need those guys out there because the Dolphins' defensive front has just been elite against the run. This graphic doesn't really tell the picture because the Dolphins defensive front has gotten hot as of late, but on the season, they're 14th in adjusted line yards, 6th in run defense grade, 7th in yards before contact. The Jets offensive line, 22nd, 11th, 29th. Now, one thing we do have to give to the Jets offensive line is they have done a decent job in pass protection. I shouldn't say decent. They've been pretty good in pass protection. 3rd in pressure rate, 17th in pass blocking grade, 10th in adjusted sack rate. So maybe that's a bright spot for the Jets. They're able to give Aaron Rodgers some clean pockets here. It's tough to say, though. First of all, Miami's defense, although they're not recording a ton of sacks, 28th in adjusted sack rate, they are generating consistent pressure. They're 9th in pressure rate, and the thing is, if you look at the left side of this graphic, Aaron Rodgers takes a ton of sacks. So if there is a team where Miami can finally record some sacks, it would be the Jets with slow-ass Aaron Rodgers in the pocket. But also, look at Aaron Rodgers' numbers when given a clean pocket. He is not taking advantage of it. Even when this Jets offensive line gives him a clean pocket to throw from, he's 36th in yards per attempt, 29th in passer rating. So I'm not sure how much this even factors in. Do we even trust Aaron Rodgers to take advantage of it if the Jets are able to give him clean pockets? Now, if you do plan on betting the Jets in this game, you can point to this graphic. Miami's been susceptible to the deep pass pretty much this whole season. They're 28th in DVOA against the deep pass. Aaron Rodgers does throw the ball downfield, and he's actually got pretty efficient numbers when he does that. You can see bottom left of this graphic, Aaron Rodgers throwing the deep pass. So maybe that's something. Maybe Aaron Rodgers can connect on some deep throws. Also, the Dolphins do run a decent amount of cover too, 20% of their defensive snaps, 6th most in the NFL. Aaron Rodgers has actually had some success throwing the ball against cover 2, 12th in completion percentage, 16th in yards per attempt, 17th in passer rating. Certainly much better than his overall passing numbers. Also, this Miami defense against the pass is definitely trending in the wrong direction. In weeks 1 through 7, the numbers look pretty good here, allowing less than 165 passing yards per game, an average opponent pass rating of 78.7. Look at their numbers in their last 6 games here. 7.1 yards per attempt. The passer rating is up to 98.1. Success rate per dropback over 56%, almost 270 passing yards per game. So this Dolphins defense against the pass is trending in the wrong direction. But here's the thing. You can say the same exact thing about the Jets passing attack. They acquired Devontae Adams. Week 7 was his first game with the team. And the first 3 games the Jets had Devontae Adams, the passing attack was looking pretty sharp. Almost 100 passer rating, 7.3 yards per attempt, success rate up close to 52%. But look at the last 3 games. they've fallen off a cliff here. 5 yards per pass attempt, passer rating down to 86, success rate down to 43, just 173 passing yards per game. This Jets passing attack is just trending in the wrong direction, just like the Dolphins pass defense is. Now, you can point at the Jets run game. They have done a much better job running the football. On their last 5 games, 4.5 yards per carry, success rate over 45%, way better than their first 7 games there on the left side of this graphic. That being said, Jets tend to run more zone blocking schemes, which plays into the strength of this Dolphins defense. They're top 10 across the board defending zone blocking schemes. And also, like I said before, this Miami defensive front has just caught fire against the run. In their last 6 games, they're allowing 4.06 yards per carry. That's pretty average, but 34.5% success rate per rush, under 85 rushing yards allowed per game. So nobody's really running the ball on this Dolphins defense right now. The Jets with no Breece Hall and a banged up offensive line, I'm just not seeing it. I mean, maybe Aaron Rodgers is able to connect on some deep throws here. The Dolphins are susceptible to the deep pass, but as a whole, don't have a ton of faith in this Jets offense across the board right now. Now let's flip it over to the other side and take a look at the Jets defense. Certainly a huge step backwards from where they were last year. As I'm sure you know, if you followed the NFL last year, the Jets were one of the best defenses in the NFL. They were first in yards per play, second in success rate. Now this year, they're second and 8th. So it's not like they've fallen off a cliff if you use the season-long numbers. The problem is, since they fired Robert Saleh, they've just been, I mean, it's gone from, the Jets might not be as good as they were last year defensively to this Jets defense might be straight up terrible. Since firing Saleh, they're allowing over 26 points per game, 5.9 yards per play, almost 50% success rate. And now you add in the fact that Sauce Gardner is not playing in this game. CJ Mosley is not playing in this game. It's hard to find things to like about this Jets defense right now. And what makes it even scarier is specifically they're struggling against the pass. That was their strength last year. They were probably the best pass defense in the NFL last year. Since firing Robert Saleh, they're getting cooked through the air. I mean, look at these efficiency numbers. 7.8 yards per pass attempt, over 52% success rate per dropback, an average opponent pass rating of 99.3. Now with no Sauce Gardner. I mean, are the Jets just a bad pass defense now? And this is concerning because they're on the road in Miami, and since Tua's came back, it hasn't been perfect for the Dolphins. They're actually struggling to run the ball, but passing attack looks fine. Over 281 passing yards per game, 8 yards per attempt, an average passer rating of 117. That's in weeks 9 through 13 with Tua back on the field. Now, we do have to talk about the Dolphins' run game, or a lack of a run game, as I should say, because like I said before, they are struggling to run the ball. In their last 4 games, 3.1 yards per carry, 31% success rate per rush, just 64 rushing yards per game for this Dolphins offense over the last 4 games. And also the Jets run defense, it hasn't been great this year, but they've actually been good against zone blocking schemes, and the Dolphins tend to run more of those than the gap concept schemes. So I'm a little worried about the Dolphins run game in this one. Now with no CJ Mosley, that definitely helps. We saw the Jets really struggle to stop the run in the games he missed earlier this year. So maybe at home against a Jets defense missing Mosley, this is when the run game can finally get going. Definitely don't love the look at that though for Miami. Now I will say we saw Tua play against this Jets team. This is actually the last time he played the Jets, December 17th of last year, so basically a year ago. He was 21 of 24, 224, a touchdown, a 119.4 passer rating. This was at home in Miami, so pretty much the same situation a year ago. As far as the Jets coverages, I mean, we already know what the Jets do. They're 3rd in cover 1 frequency, a lot of man. They're 4th in man coverage frequency, 7th in single high safety frequency. It's not the best matchup ever for Tua. I mean, against cover 1, he's got pretty good numbers, 11th in yards per attempt, 4th in pass rating. He's actually got slightly better numbers against zone coverage. He's actually got excellent numbers against zone coverage. Against man, I mean, not that they're bad, 9th, 17th, and 8th. And against single high safeties, he's been better against 2 high safeties. So it's not a particularly great matchup for Tua, but it's not a bad matchup either. What worries me for Tua in this game is right here. One thing this Jets defense still does, now pretty much everything has fallen off for this Jets defense, but one thing they can still do is pressure the passer. They're 2nd in pressure rate, 4th in adjusted sack rate. I actually think they're 1st in pressure rate since week 9. I was looking at recently to see if they've fallen off. It's the opposite. I believe they lead the NFL in pressure rate in their last 4 or 5 games. So this Jets defense can still pressure the passer. Look at Tua's numbers when pressured. This is some Jameis Winston shit right here. He's 2nd in yards per attempt, 1st in passer rating. He's got a 127 passer rating when pressured. Excellent news, right? Well, look at the turnover-worthy play rate. 40th, 8.2% turnover-worthy play rate when pressured. Look at the pressure to sack rate, 24.6%, 36 in the NFL. So what happens when Tua gets pressured? He either makes a huge play, turns it over, or takes a sack. That is Jameis Winston. I mean, Tua is Jameis Winston under pressure this year, which almost doesn't make sense, but the numbers don't lie. Definitely a little bit concerning. I will say, though, last week on the road in Lambeau, Tua had 0 turnover-worthy plays. So hopefully that's a sign of Tua turning things around and starting to protect the football a bit more, because the Jets pass rush is coming, and honestly, little concerned about that. As a whole, though, when it comes to betting this game, there's just not enough here for me to take the Jets. I took the Dolphins. I laid 5.5. I think it's a decent bet at home. I do think the Dolphins will finally be able to run the ball for the first time in like a month. Terron Armstead, the left tackle, being questionable definitely concerns me a little bit. He hasn't practiced all week. Obviously would love to have him out there, but I did place the bet. I'm on the Dolphins, minus 5.5 next game. Next up, we got Browns Steelers in Pittsburgh, a rematch of a game it feels like we just watched just a couple weeks ago in the snow. This one's in Pittsburgh. Steelers are laying 6.5 or 7. There are a couple 7s out there. Total sitting at 43.5 across the board. Let's take a look at the pie charts, and according to the data, action's coming in pretty heavily on the Steelers side. Over 65% of the tickets, about 65% of the money. As I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So let's get into this one, and you might remember the video that I did for the Thursday night football game, the Browns Steelers in the snow. I brought up these splits right here. These are actually screenshots from that video. The Steelers coverages are actually a pretty favorable matchup for Jameis Winston. Obviously, these are numbers from the video, so this is at the time. Look at Jameis Winston's numbers against cover 1. You can see 3rd, 5th, 2nd, 1st. Against single high safety versus against 2 high safeties. Much, much better against single high safeties. In fact, he was 1st in pass rating against single high safeties at the time. So we all remember what happened in that game. Jameis Winston was making throws in the snow. Browns ended up winning outright. Now, the Steelers ended up running a ton of cover 3 in that game. And the reason I'm pointing that out is since that game, I mean, Jameis' numbers against cover 3 have fallen off a cliff. On the season, he's 37th in completion percentage, 24th in yards per attempt, 20th in passer rating. And this Steelers defense runs cover 3 a lot. Actually, the 3rd most in the NFL. In that particular game, they were in cover 3 over 41% of the time. So I expect to see a lot of cover 3 here. And we just pointed out Jameis Winston, although he's got great numbers against cover 1, single high safeties, against cover 3, not so much. In fact, the numbers look pretty ugly. Also, another thing, at the time, Jameis Winston was 1st in passer rating, 1st in turnover-worthy play against single high safeties. But look at the numbers now. They're starting to even out a bit. He's back at 15th in passer rating, 21st in turnover-worthy play rate against single high safeties. So since that Week 12 matchup against the Steelers, Jameis Winston hasn't been all that elite against single high safeties. So this is still a decent matchup for Jameis Winston coverage-wise, but not quite as attractive looking as it was in Week 12. Also, Highsmith is back. He didn't play in that Week 12 matchup against the Browns. So you got TJ Watt, you got Highsmith, and you got Preston Smith on there as well, the Steelers edition. So definitely looking like a much better matchup for the Steelers defense here than it did in Week 12. Also, Jameis Winston's numbers under pressure are starting to even out a bit as well. If you remember a couple weeks back, he had great yards per attempt, great passer rating. He's back at 28th in passer rating when pressured. Turnover-worthy play rate is still a huge issue here, 42nd. So even these splits not looking nearly as good. Keep in mind, he's on the road in Pittsburgh. That pass rush is coming. They're one of the best in the league at getting to the quarterback, as I'm sure you already know. Keep in mind, last week on the road in Denver, he threw for 497 yards. He dropped back to pass 58 times. He had just an 88 passer rating in the game, 4 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. When you drop back to pass 58 times, you're going to throw for some yards. Now, did he make some great throws? Sure. Not trying to take credit away from him, but the idea that Jameis Winston is this unstoppable passing force now, the efficiency numbers aren't quite there, can't handle pressure, puts the ball in harm's way. So I'm not all aboard the Jameis Winston train right now. And it's not like we can count on Cleveland to give him any run support. In the last 5 games, 3.3 yards per carry, success rate per rush under 35%, under 78 rushing yards per game. Pittsburgh's actually been struggling a little bit against the run, allowing 4.86 yards per carry in the last 5 games. I can't trust Cleveland to exploit that. They haven't been able to run the ball at all. So we're talking about Jameis Winston on the road in Pittsburgh against the Steelers pass rush, who just got Highsmith back without run support in windy weather. 14 to 20 mile per hour winds with gusts up to 25 miles an hour, I'm reading. So wind could be a factor here. You ask me, that sounds like picks. I mean, sure, he's going to have opportunities to make some big throws, and he probably makes them, probably throws a couple picks as well. So, no, I don't particularly like the matchup for the Browns offense. I think Jameis is going to put the ball in harm's way. That's what he does. And when we look at the matchup on the other side, I mean, how can we even have faith in the Browns defense anymore? In their last 5 games, they're allowing over 29 points per game. 7.3 yards per play is nuts. Success rate over 46%. They can't seem to stop anybody. Russell Wilson had no problems throwing the ball on the road in Cleveland in the snow. 21 of 28, 270 yards, 9.6 yards per attempt, a touchdown, a 116 passer rating. That was in a blizzard. Had no problems throwing the ball on the road in Cleveland in a blizzard. And if you look at the matchup for Russell Wilson, that probably wasn't an anomaly. The Browns defense runs a lot of man coverage. They're 7th in man coverage frequency, 4th in cover 1 frequency, 3rd in single high safety frequency. Look at Russell Wilson's numbers against those coverages. Against single high safeties, 3rd in yards per attempt, 3rd in passer rating. A lot of big throws. Against man coverage, 1st in yards per attempt, 4th in passer rating. Against cover 1, 1st in yards per attempt, 3rd in passer rating. He's been cooking on these coverages this season. Now, obviously, we do have to mention that George Pickens has been added to the injury report. He did practice on Friday, but he's officially listed as questionable. That would be huge because if you watch the Steelers, he's a huge part of the success Russell Wilson's having. I would imagine he plays. I mean, he participated in a light practice on Friday, going against the team that he practically got in a fist fight with. I would imagine he'd be motivated to get out there and score a couple touchdowns against Cleveland. So, I mean, if I had to guess, I'd say I think Pickens plays, but obviously I don't know for sure. He's listed as questionable. Now, if you are looking to take the points with the Browns in this one, I do have a couple things for you. A couple things that worry me here for Russell Wilson. Number one being the deep ball is such a big part of Russell Wilson's arsenal. 15 to 20 mile per hour winds, gusts up to 25 miles per hour. The wind could be a factor here. So with Russell Wilson relying, I don't want to say relying on the deep ball, but utilizing the deep ball a lot, definitely don't love the idea of that. Also, Cleveland's in pretty ass defending the run as well. In their last 5 games, 5.3 yards per carry, over 133 rushing yards allowed per game. But I don't really trust the Steelers' offense to exploit that. Kind of the same thing I said on the other side of the ball. I don't trust the Browns' run game to exploit the Steelers' front 7. Same thing with the Steelers' run game. They run the ball a lot. It's not very efficient. So I don't really know if I trust the Steelers to run the ball in this game. Also, it's the Browns' defense. It looks pretty bad, but what have I said about the Browns' defense in the past? They tend to show up for these games, these big games against Mike Tomlin, these big games against Lamar Jackson. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see the Browns defense best fastball here. But personally, as far as betting the game, there's just not enough here for me to get on Cleveland. I think the Steelers should definitely be able to score points in this one. Now, as far as Jameis Winston, if he doesn't turn the ball over, it could potentially be a shootout. He could go touchdown for touchdown, so maybe that's the case. But personally, I think we can hang our hats on Jameis Winston, giving the Steelers at least one free one. So it'd be the Steelers for me here. Minus 6.5 or Steelers team total over. That's the way I'd go with it. Maybe possibly an over, but these AFC North games, these Steelers-Browns games, Steelers-Ravens games, they tend to be lower scoring. So give me Steelers minus 6.5 or Steelers team total over. That's the way I'd look at it. Maybe a Steelers defensive touchdown. Honestly, it worked on Monday night with Denver's defense. Maybe go back to that next game.
Real quick, something I forgot to add for that Steelers game. So the Steelers are home at Pittsburgh. What's the record?
Since 1990, they're 23-11 straight up and 31-3 straight up. Oh no, 23-11 against the spread, 31-3 straight up.
Since 1990, they're 31-3 straight up at home against the Browns, and 23-11
against the spread,
and 23-11 against the spread. So the Browns tend to struggle here on the road in Pittsburgh. So yeah, it'll be Steelers for me. Next game.
Raiders on the road in Tampa Bay. Bucks laying 6.5, mostly 6.5. I do see a couple 7s out there. Total sitting at 46.5. Take a look at the pie charts, and according to the data, actions coming in on the Bucks side. Over 55% of the tickets, over 65% of the money. As I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So let's get into this matchup. We'll start with the Raiders offense against the Bucks defense. These are a couple of ugly graphics next to each other here. The Raiders offense 25th in yards per play, 26th in success rate. The Bucks defense 23rd and 29th. So we got a bottom 10 offense here against a bottom 10 defense. Now, something I want to point out. The Raiders offensive line against the Bucks defensive front. You may look at this graphic and think this is a mismatch for Tampa Bay. And I mean, I get it. The Raiders are 31st in adjusted line yards, 27th in run blocking grade, 26th in yards before carry. Bucks defense 12th, 24th, and 13th. This looks like an advantage for Tampa Bay. But keep in mind, we're starting to see a little bit of a run game here brewing with the Raiders. Under 93 rushing yards a game in their last 2, so it's not an explosion, but 4.5 yards per carry, almost 43% success rate per rush. Compared to weeks 1 through 11, that is a serious improvement. So the Raiders are starting to show signs of life in terms of running the football, and the reason why is right here. Notice there are no injury designations on the offensive line. That offensive line is completely healthy for the first time basically this entire season. They got 3 starters back in their last game. 3 starters back on the offensive line. In that game against Kansas City, who, by the way, is a top 5 run defense. So in that game against the Chiefs, with those 3 pieces back on the offensive line, they ran the ball 25 times, 116 yards, 4.6 yards per carry. This was without their RB1 and RB2. So missing the first 2 running backs on their depth chart against one of the best run defenses in the NFL, the Raiders were running the ball. So having those pieces back on the offensive line, huge for the Raiders. The Raiders might be able to run the football down the stretch here. Here's the problem with that. Tampa Bay seems to be getting their shit together in that department. Through the first 8 games, they're allowing over 132 rushing yards per game, almost 5.3 yards per carry. In their last 4 games, they're allowing less than 89 rushing yards per game, 3.7 yards per carry. So the Bucs defense was looking pretty bad against the run through the first half of the season. Second half of the season, the Bucs seem to be defending the run at a higher level. We'll have to see, but it makes it tough in terms of making a prediction. On one hand, we have a Raiders with a healthy offensive line finally. On the other hand, we have a Bucs defensive front that seems to have just started defending the run. So really don't know where to take that. I personally think we will find an opportunity to bet on this Raiders rushing attack. Just not sure if this is it on the road against this Bucs defense. Now, what about the matchup for Aiden O'Connell? And this is interesting. So first off, let's start with the Bucs pass rush, who, by the way, are playing much better. The Bucs pass rush has actually looked pretty good recently. Earlier in the year, not so much. Recently, the Bucs have been pressuring the passer. They're 13th in pressure rate, 10th in adjusted sack rate. They're also 4th in blitz rate. Look at the left side of this graphic. Aiden O'Connell weirdly looking great handling pressure. He's actually 4th in the NFL, small sample size, but he's actually 4th in the NFL when pressured so far this year with a 0% turnover-worthy play rate. And check this out. The Bucs blitz a lot, right? 4th in blitz rate. Well, Aiden O'Connell, significantly better against the blitz. I mean, on the left side, top 10 numbers across the board. On the right side, not so much when not blitz. So Aiden O'Connell's actually better against the blitz. Now, you might be saying this is a super small sample size, and I get it, but actually these splits were similar looking last year as well. Aiden O'Connell is better against the blitz. He's actually pretty good against the blitz, and the Bucs are 4th in blitz rate. So, all right, is this a favorable matchup for Aiden O'Connell? Here's the thing. No. No, it's not. In addition to blitzing, the Bucs run a lot of zone coverage. In fact, they run more zone coverage than any other team in the NFL. 1st in zone coverage frequency, 6th in single high safety frequency, 1st in cover 3. So the Bucs are blitzing and living in cover 3. That's what Todd Bowles does. Look at Aiden O'Connell's numbers against these coverages. It's pretty ugly. Terrible numbers against zone, actually decent numbers against man coverage, which is probably why the Raiders were able to stay competitive with the Chiefs last week. Chiefs blitz and play man coverage. The Bucs blitz, but they play zone coverage. Not a great start there. Also, Aiden O'Connell, much better against 2 high safety looks. Bucs run a lot of single high safeties. He's got some really ugly numbers against single high safeties. How about cover 3? Bucs run more cover 3 than any other defense in the NFL. Aiden O'Connell, one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL against cover 3. So we saw those numbers against the blitz, and we were thinking, hey, maybe this is a good matchup for Aiden O'Connell. I mean, with all that cover 3, Tampa's going to be running. I'd say probably not, but hey, we'll see. The Bucs defense, it's not like it's elite. They're also banged up. Jordan Whitehead's going to miss this game. KJ Britt's going to miss this game. They're also missing an edge rusher. So Tampa's by no means healthy. They've also got injuries to the depth of their defense as well. So Tampa's defense is banged up. Raiders' run game is showing improvements. Aiden O'Connell, solid numbers against the blitz. So there are some angles there. If you like the Raiders' offense, personally, I really just don't know. It's so unpredictable in my opinion. I think the Raiders might be able to run the ball a little bit. Aiden O'Connell, maybe. I really don't know. Don't love the matchup. I really don't like this Raiders team. But now let's flip it over and look at the matchup on the other side. And honestly, this is where you can find some value on the Raiders. We know this Tampa Bay offense hasn't looked quite the same the last few weeks. Chris Godwin got hurt. Also, Mike Evans missed a few games in there. In weeks 1 through 7, almost 30 points per game, 6.8 yards per play. Since week 8, it's 25.2 points per game, down to 6.1 yards per play. So the Bucs offense hasn't looked quite as explosive. Success rate is down as well. Passing production is way down for Baker Mayfield, 7.9 yards per attempt in weeks 1 through 7, 107.6 passer rating, down to 6.8 and 93.8. The Bucs offense has become more run-centric with Bucky Irving. They definitely run the ball a lot more than they did early in the season, and that is not great news for Tampa Bay in this matchup. Number one, Bucky Irving is not even 100%. He's banged up. Now, he's listed as questionable, but I'm pretty sure he just got ruled in. So it looks like Bucky Irving is going to play, but he's banged up. But check this out. The Raiders defense out of nowhere is playing lights out against the run. In their last 5 games, they're allowing 85 rushing yards per game, 3.61 yards per carry, success rate per rush under 32%. Nobody's been able to run the ball on this Raiders defense in the last handful of games. And this isn't crazy, by the way, because the Raiders defense did the same exact thing last year. When Antonio Pierce took over as interim head coach, nobody could run the ball on him in the second half of the year. So this Raiders run defense might be a top 10 run defense, maybe even top 5 down the stretch, because they did the same exact thing last year. Not to mention, Tampa Bay tends to run a lot of gap concept blocking schemes that plays right into the strength of the Raiders defense. They're actually a top 10, maybe even top 5 defense against gap concept runs. So I don't know if the Bucs are going to be able to run the ball in this game. This is an offense that's been pretty, I don't want to say reliant, because they are a pretty well-rounded offense, but they've become much more reliant on the run these last 6 or 7 games than they were early in the season. I don't know if they're going to be able to run the ball in this game, which means there's a lot of pressure on Baker Mayfield to cover this 6.5, 7-point line by himself using his arm. So why don't we look at the matchup for Baker Mayfield? Well, the Raiders run a decent amount of man coverage, 8th in man coverage frequency. Baker Mayfield has better numbers against zone this year, so all right, maybe a little bit of a positive angle there for the Raiders defense. So at this point, you might be thinking, yo, is the Raiders defense about to go into Tampa Bay and play the Bucs tough? I'm not sure about that, because there's just some really concerning things here if you like the Raiders. Number one, this Raiders defense is a mess. Now, this isn't new. These pieces have been out, but they're missing 6 starters, 3 in the secondary. So this Raiders defense is a shell of what it could be. That's number one. Number two, there's a lot of positive angles here supporting the matchup for Baker Mayfield. Number one, the Raiders struggle to generate pressure. They're 30th in pressure rate, 23rd in adjusted sack rate. Baker Mayfield, a 107.2 passer rating when given a clean pocket. Tristan Wirfs is healthy again. Should have plenty of clean pockets to throw from in this game. Also, the Raiders blitz a lot. They're 7th in blitz rate. Baker Mayfield definitely has better numbers when blitz. 2nd in completion percentage, 11th in yards per attempt against the blitz, 7th in passer rating. So the Raiders blitz and are unable to generate pressure. That's Baker Mayfield's wheelhouse right there. Also, the Raiders tend to run a lot of cover zero, 9.7%. Almost 10% of the Raiders plays are cover zero. That's a lot, the most in the NFL. Baker Mayfield, excellent numbers throwing the ball in cover zero. Now, that's pretty infrequent. That's a small sample size, but still it's something. Also, the Raiders really struggle against the short pass. 26 in DVOA against the short pass. Baker Mayfield throws the short pass a lot, and he's got very efficient numbers throwing that pass. So although the Raiders do run man coverage, and Baker Mayfield has struggled against man coverage from time to time with all those injuries, and I don't like the matchup for the Raiders defense. It should be a Bucs game, not trying to lay 6.5 or 7, especially when the Raiders might be able to take the run away and the Raiders might be able to run it. So I guess I probably lean Bucs team total over, maybe Bucs minus 6.5, but I can tell you there's a very good chance that I'm not betting this game. So let's say Bucs or pass next. Next up is Falcons Vikings. I actually already recorded a video on this game earlier in the week, so here it is. All right, like I said, we got Atlanta on the road in Minnesota. The Vikings are now laying 5.5 across the board. This number was at 4.5. It's been moved up to 5.5. Total sitting at 45.5 pretty much across the board as well. Let's take a look at the pie charts, and according to the data, action's coming in pretty split on this one. About 50-50 on the tickets, about 55% of the money coming in on the Vikings. As I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So let's get into this matchup, and we'll start with some trends. Atlanta has not handled the Vikings well. In their last 6 matchups against Minnesota, they're 1-5 straight up, 1-5 against the spread. Also, trending hard to the under here for both these teams. On the season, the Falcons are 4-8 to the under. Minnesota is also 4-8 to the under. In fact, they're tied for the 2 most under-heavy teams so far this year. There's actually 6 teams tied at 4-8 to the under. These are 2 of them. Minnesota's also 1-5 to the under in their home games this year. So if you're a person that's into trends, you might want to look at the under. So let's match these two teams up on the field. We'll start with the Falcons offense against the Vikings defense. Not as big of a mismatch as you may have thought. I think a lot of us look at this game, they're like, how's the Falcons offense going to move the ball here? Well, Atlanta does have some nice looking offensive numbers on the season. They're 11th in yards per play, 8th in success rate, passing numbers 9th in yards per pass attempt, 11th in success rate per dropback, rushing 16th and 7th. So the Falcons have been putting up some offensive numbers. The problem is most of those were earlier in the season. The last couple of games, pretty ugly from the Falcons offensively here. Minnesota, as we know, top 5 defense on the year. You don't need me to tell you that. Now, one thing I will say for the Falcons offense is I think a lot of people are looking at this matchup thinking there's no way Atlanta can run the ball on the Vikings defense. Vikings have maybe the best run defense in the NFL, but we have to keep in mind that there's no Pace. Ivan Pace Jr. is out for this game, and you might be thinking, who cares? It's one player. Well, actually, according to Pro Football Focus, this is one of the most important defensive pieces against the run in the NFL. He's rated 7th in the league in run defense grade, 1st in run stopping percentage. So this is an important piece if you're trying to stop the run, and we've seen the Vikings play one game without Pace, and they got run on. In the 5 games before last week, they were allowing 3.27 yards per carry, under 70 rushing yards per game, success rate per rush under 25%. Look at last week, 154 yards rushing, almost 5 yards a carry for the Cardinals. So maybe not having Pace on the field matters for this Viking run defense. Also, Atlanta runs a lot of zone blocking schemes. In fact, they run more zone blocking schemes than any other offense in the NFL. They're first in zone run frequency. That plays right into the weakness of this Vikings defense. They're one of the best defenses in the NFL against gap concept blocking schemes. Against zone runs, 16th in yards per carry. Also, as good as this Vikings defensive line has been, and it's been great, they're 9th in adjusted line yards, 1st in run defense grade, 2nd in yards before contact. We do have to give some credit to the Falcons offensive line. That offensive line's been great this year, 16th, 6th, and 12th. So it's not like they're completely outmatched here in terms of generating push in the run game. Here's where it gets tough, because at this point, I'm like, hey, maybe the Falcons could run the ball in this game. No one's expecting the Falcons to run it. There's no Pace. Maybe Atlanta could run the ball in this game. Here's where it gets tough. The last 2 games have been ugly for the Falcons trying to run the ball. In the 5 games before that, 5.1 yards per carry, 156 rushing yards per game, 54% success rate per rush. In their last 2 games against the Broncos and Chargers, 83 rushing yards per game, 2.9 yards per carry, success rate down below 31%. Now you can say, well, Kyle, they played the Broncos and Chargers, 2 great defenses. Okay, but what do you think the Vikings is? The Vikings are also a great defense. So I don't know, even without Pace, it's just really tough to have faith in the Falcons run game after what we've seen the last 2 games. So as a whole, even though I do think the Vikings run defense might be a little vulnerable right now with the injury, I still don't think we can trust the Falcons to run the ball in this game, which means there's going to be a lot of pressure on old Mr. Cousins. So why don't we look at the matchup for Kirk Cousins here? And I actually have a positive angle for Kirk Cousins. The Vikings are elite at taking away the short pass. They're 3rd in DVOA against the short pass. Why is that a positive angle for Kirk Cousins? He doesn't throw many short passes. C+ frequency, 40.9%. He actually throws a lot of intermediate passes, which on paper is the weakest passing depth for this Vikings defense. So, okay, there's something if you're trying to back Kirk Cousins in the revenge game. Here's the problem with that. Basically, every other angle for Kirk Cousins after that one is negative. First of all, we got the Vikings pass rush. They're 1st in blitz rate, 7th in pressure rate, 9th in adjusted sack rate. We know Brian Flores knows how to put pressure on the quarterback. Now, Kirk Cousins has made some throws under pressure. He's actually 7th in yards per attempt. He's also 13th in pressure to sack rate, so it's not all bad. But look at the passer rating. 64.5 passer rating when pressured, and the turnover-worthy play rate is terrifying, 7.9%. That's 39th in the NFL. So you put pressure on Kirk Cousins, as we saw last week against the Chargers. He puts the football in harm's way. That's a terrifying number there. Also, we mentioned that the Vikings are 1st in blitz rate. You can see in the top right here, Vikings 1st in blitz rate. Nobody blitzes more than Brian Flores in the league so far this year. Kirk Cousins, much better when not blitzed, although the turnover-worthy play rate is pretty concerning whether he's blitzed or not. It's pretty bad on both sides, but you can see completion percentage, yards per attempt, passer rating, all much better when he's not blitzed. Brian Flores is most definitely going to be blitzing. As far as the Vikings coverages go, they run a lot of 2 high safety looks. In fact, they're 1st in 2 high safety frequency. They also run a ton of cover 2. third in cover 2 frequency. Both of these numbers are bad news for Kirk Cousins. He's been much better against single high safeties. You can see passer rating, turnover-worthy play rate against single high safety looks 16th and 28th. Against 2 high safeties, 29th and 33rd. Definitely don't like that. And also, they run a lot of cover 2. Kirk Cousins, awful numbers trying to throw the ball in cover 2. 27th in yards per attempt, 36th in pass rating, 35th in turnover-worthy play rate. So it started off looking like it might be a decent matchup for Kirk Cousins, but the deeper we look, the more it looks like a nightmare for old Kirk Cousins. Also, this Falcons offense, like I mentioned before, 2 terrible games in a row. We were talking specifically about their run game, but it applies across the board. In their first 10 games, they were averaging 23.8 points per game, 6.6 yards per play, 52.7% success rate. In their last 2 games, under 10 points per game, 9.5 points per game, 4.8 yards per play. Success rate is significantly down as well. And again, you can say, well, Kyle, they played the Broncos and Chargers. The Vikings defense, even without pace, might be better than both those teams. I mean, the Vikings have one of the best defenses in the NFL. We also have kind of a pattern forming here when it comes to the Falcons offense. They kind of seem to be doing all of their damage against bad defenses. Against top 16 defenses, they're averaging just 15.4 points per game. Against bottom 16 defenses, 29.8 points per game. Now, the yards per play and success rate is actually a little bit closer, but no question, this offense has done most of their scoring damage against the bottom 16 defenses. The Vikings are most definitely not a bottom 16 defense. I mean, look at the passing production. Against bottom 16 defenses, over 292 passing yards per game, a 118.9 average passer rating. Against top 16 defenses, it drops to a 72.5. Yes, the interceptions probably have a lot to do with that, but still definitely concerning if you're trying to back Kirk Cousins here. As a whole on this side of the ball, I have to say, I don't like this for the Falcons offensively. I want it to be sharp. I wanted to be like, oh, Kirk Cousins revenge game. Ivan Pace Jr. is out. Falcons are going to be able to run the ball. There's just not enough here. This is a really bad matchup for Kirk Cousins, and I think it's going to be ugly for the Falcons offense in this game. But what about the matchup on the other side? Let's take a look at the matchup for the Vikings offensively. Obviously, on paper, this is looking like a pretty favorable matchup. They're 12th in yards per play on the season, 11th in success rate. Falcons defense, 19th and 22nd. So solid start here for the Vikings offensively. We had that one game in Jacksonville. It was week 10 on the road against the Jags, where the Vikings offense just looked terrible. They scored 12 points in that. I think they won 12. Yes, it was 12-7. I know that because I got Vikings minus 4.5. I won by the hook. So they won that game 12-7. The offense didn't look good at all. 5.2 yards per play. Passing attack numbers were down. 6.3 yards per attempt. 48.2 passer rating. Sam Darnold was throwing some picks. And a lot of people, including myself, were like, the Vikings offensive magic is over. Sam Darnold's going to come crashing back down to earth. This is the beginning of the end for Sam Darnold. Well, they've bounced back since then. In their 3 games since that Jacksonville game, 25.3 points per game, 6.4 yards per play, success rate over 54%. Passing numbers are looking elite again. 275 passing yards per game, 8.4 yards per attempt, 67.4% success rate per dropback, passer rating up close to 112. So Sam Darnold shut us up pretty quickly. And this should be a pretty favorable matchup for Sam Darnold at home against a Falcons pass defense that hasn't been very good this year. We do have to mention, though, that the Falcons actually played great defense against Justin Herbert last week. Now, it was a perfect spot. The Falcons were coming off a bye week at home against a Chargers team that just played back-to-back tough games, then had to fly across the country for a non-conference NFC game. So it was a beautiful spot for the Falcons. We still have to give them credit, though. They played great defense. They held Justin Herbert, who's been red hot. 150 passing yards in the game, 6.3 yards per attempt, 87.2 passer rating. So this Falcons defense definitely looked better last week than we probably have seen them look most of the year. Here's where I get a bit worried for Atlanta's defense, though. They run a lot of cover 3, 36% of their defensive snaps, 6th most in the NFL. Sam Darnold has excellent numbers throwing on cover 3 so far this year. 6th in completion percentage, 3rd in yards per attempt, 9th in pass rating, 2nd in big time throw rate. He's had no problems throwing the ball in cover 3 so far this year. So at home, definitely like the matchup here for Sam Darnold against a lot of cover 3. Now, we do have to mention that the Falcons might be getting Mike Hughes back at corner. He hasn't played in about a month, so that would be nice to have him back. And I believe that would be the first time the Falcons defense is fully healthy this entire season. So that's something, but this is still not a Falcons defense I really believe in. So going on the road to Minnesota, running a bunch of cover 3 against Sam Darnold and those receivers, not exactly a matchup I love. I will say, though, this Falcons defensive front out of nowhere. I mean, in weeks 2 through 9, right, there were 8 games in there, an 8-game sample size. They're allowing 5 yards per carry, over 134 rushing yards per game. In their last 3 games, they're allowing 87 rushing yards per game, 4 yards per carry, success rate per rush under 38%. So out of nowhere, this Falcons run defense is looking pretty good. And keep in mind, Falcons had a great run defense last year. I think they were top 3. So this was a great run defense last year. It wouldn't be crazy to believe that this Falcons defense is going to be pretty solid against the run down the stretch. So that is something to keep an eye on. And remember, this Vikings offense hasn't been able to run the ball in forever. In weeks 5 through 11, that's a 6-game sample size. They were averaging under 4 yards per carry, 31.2% success rate per rush. In their last 2 games, it's up at 4.7 yards per carry. They played the Bears and the Cardinals, 2 less than stellar run defenses. The Vikings run game is not a unit I trust at all. This offense works by Sam Darnold making downfield throws, not the run game. So the Falcons, with this newly found run defense, I actually think they are able to take the run away from Minnesota. So there's going to be a lot of pressure on Sam Darnold, but at home against cover 3, I trust Sam Darnold to make some throws. It's a matter of whether or not he throws picks or not. I think Sam Darnold could play well. So where does that leave me in terms of placing a bet? Well, I can tell you the angle I feel most comfortable with is the Vikings blitz packages against Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins does not look right. Everyone keeps talking about this. He's not planning right. Prop Beaver's been saying it all season. Loves to say Kirk Cousins can't plant. Starting to look like he might be right in that respect. So Brian Flores sending all those extra rushers at Kirk Cousins. He struggles against the pass rush. He struggles against the blitz. Falcons haven't been able to run the ball. I just can't have any faith in the Falcons offense here on the road. So that would definitely point me over towards the Minnesota side. I lean Vikings minus 4.5. Also like the under. I think I might like the under a bit more at 45.5, or Falcons team total under. I see a 20.5 here at minus 130. So that's the way I'm going with this one. Vikings minus 4.5, under 45.5, Falcons team total under 20.5. I'll probably end up betting some combination of that. So leaning towards the Minnesota side. And so yeah, like I said, I was leaning towards Vikings, leaning towards Falcons team total under. It's up at 5.5, 6 now. I actually never even bet it. Maybe I'll take the Vikings at minus 5.5 or a Falcons team total under. As of right now, that one's just a lean. I'll let you know in the live show what I end up doing. Anyway, next up, Seattle on the road in Arizona. Cardinals laying 2.5 points at home here. Total sitting at 44.5. Take a look at the pie charts, and according to the data, action's coming in on the Seahawks side. Over 65% of the tickets, over 65% of the money. As I always say, take it with a grain of salt. So let's get into this matchup, and we'll start with the trend. Seattle owns this team. In their last 6 matchups against the Cardinals, the Seahawks are 6-0. 6 wins in a row in this division rivalry, 5-1 against the spread. And specifically in their trips to Arizona, they've been extremely profitable. In their last 11 trips to Arizona, 7-3-1 against the spread, 9-1-1 straight up. So the Cardinals have nightmares about this Seahawks team. This has been an extremely one-sided rivalry. So will that trend continue here? Well, it's probably good news that this game's on the road in Arizona, because this Seahawks team has been much better on the road, specifically talking about the offense right now. In their home games, they're averaging 20 points per game. 6.3 yards per play is actually the same. Success rate down at 48.7%. On the road, 26.4 points per game. Success rate up at 51.7%. So this offense has been much more efficient. I shouldn't say much more efficient. This offense has been more efficient in their road games. So maybe the fact that this game's in Arizona, maybe that's good news for the Seahawks. When we match up these two units on paper, Seattle does have the advantage here. 14th in yards per play, 14th in success rate. This is an offense that wants to throw the ball with Geno Smith. They're 11th in yards per pass attempt, 15th in success rate per dropback. Matched up against an Arizona defense that cannot get off the field. 31st in success rate, 27th in success rate per dropback. So looking like a pretty good matchup for the Seahawks so far. But then we get to this part right here, the Seahawks offensive line, and this is where things get a little worrisome for Seattle. Although we do have to take note when we're looking at these numbers, the Seahawks have played pretty much this entire season without arguably their best offensive lineman, Abraham Lucas, and he's been back for a couple games now. They had a third-string right tackle for starting for most of the season. So I think we can all agree that the Seahawks offensive line is not this bad. Besides, the Arizona defensive front hasn't been anything special. So even though we look at this graphic and it looks like the Arizona defensive front has the edge here, I would consider these two units even. And the reason that's important is right here. Geno Smith under pressure has struggled this year. 55.7 passer rating when pressure. That's 35th in the NFL. We know Geno Smith, when he has a clean pocket, he can make the throws. He could be one of the more effective quarterbacks in the NFL. When pressured, he's really struggled this year. He's also taking sacks at a high rate. So the fact that Abraham Lucas is now healthy at right tackle, the fact that the Cardinals don't have much of a pass rush, this is all very good news for Seattle. That being said, it's not a perfect matchup for Geno Smith. In fact, if you're betting Arizona, there's actually a few angles you like for the Cardinals defense against the pass. Number one, they're doing a much better job overall. In their last 5 games, 218.2 passing yards allowed per game, 6.2 yards per attempt. You could see much, much better than their numbers from weeks 1 through 7. Average opponent pass rating dropped from 103 to 88.7. So the Cardinals have done a much better job against the pass as of late. Also, the Cardinals run a lot of cover 3, 8th most in the NFL, over 34% of their snaps. Geno Smith, not that great against cover 3. He's not absolutely terrible, bottom of the league or anything, but you can see his numbers against cover 3 in comparison to his overall stats, not great. So Geno Smith, not the greatest numbers against cover 3. Arizona does run a solid amount of cover 3. Also, Arizona doesn't blitz. 26th in blitz rate. Geno Smith, much better when blitzed. So again, it's not the perfect matchup for Geno Smith, but it's not a terrible matchup for him either. They are on the road where Geno Smith has been much better. Arizona does not have much of a pass rush. Geno Smith can make throws from a clean pocket. So it's a pretty solid matchup for Geno Smith. Not to mention, like we pointed out before, he's had success against this Cardinals team in the past. I do have to say, though, I'm a little bit worried about the Seahawks run game. The Seahawks forgot how to run the ball, by the way. Since week 6, check this out. Since week 6, they're averaging 3.3 yards per carry as a team, 77.4 rushing yards per game, success rate per rush under 35%. Now, their success rate per rush has been terrible all year, but at least in the first 5 weeks of the season, they were averaging 5.4 yards per carry. That's gone. The Seahawks just cannot run the ball at all. And this Arizona defense, out of nowhere, is actually good against the run. Since week 7, they're allowing just 82.3 rushing yards per game, 4.02 yards per carry. So the Cardinals are looking like a pretty solid run defense. Seattle can't run the ball. Geno Smith, probably not going to have run support in this one. Not to mention, most of Seattle's rushing damage has come via gap concept blocking schemes. Arizona is better against gap concept blocking schemes. So reiterating the same point here, don't think Seattle can run the ball. And by the way, Kenneth Walker's not playing. He's been ruled out. So again, for the third time, Seattle not going to be able to run the ball in this game. But like I said before, I think Geno Smith should have a good game, but I don't expect much run support here. But what about the matchup on the other side? Let's take a look at the Cardinals offense against the Seahawks defense. Surprisingly close. The Seahawks defense out of nowhere is looking pretty good. On the year, they're 13th in yards per play, 14th in success rate. Arizona offensively 5th and 9th. So Arizona does have the edge here on the season-long numbers, but that gap is closing. Closing's not a word. That gap is closing. There was a 5-game stretch there in weeks 4 through 8 where Seattle was just getting cooked through the air. In weeks 4 through 8, 8.9 yards per attempt, success rate per dropback over 60%, 268 passing yards allowed per game. Look at the 4 games since then. Just 6.3 yards per attempt, an average opponent pass rating of 79.7. The Seahawks are playing some defense against the pass, and check this out. More importantly, because they're playing the Cardinals, the Seahawks have become a lockdown run defense. In their last 4 games, they're allowing 3.9 yards per carry, 30.6% success rate per rush is elite, under 85 rushing yards allowed per game in their last 4. So Mike McDonald seems to be getting their shit together on the defensive side of the ball. You add Ernest Jones at linebacker, you get a little bit healthier. The Seahawks defense might be pretty good. And remember that explosive Cardinals passing attack we were seeing there for a few weeks? Marvin Harrison Jr., Trey McBride, Kyler Murray was slinging it. Well, that seems to be trending the wrong way as well. In their last 2 games, 6.7 yards per pass attempt, 75.5 average passer rating. So the Cardinals' dynamic, explosive passing attack shined a very brief light, a very bright but very brief light. It seems to be trending in the wrong direction. Now, Arizona is an offense that wants to run the ball, and they're back home now where they've been very efficient running the football this year. 5.7 yards per carry in their 6 home games, over 172 rushing yards per game. That being said, we just saw this matchup in Week 12. Granted, it was on the road in Seattle. They were held to 49 rushing yards. 3.5 yards per carry. I mean, 14.3% success rate per rush is wild. They couldn't run the ball at all against the Seahawks just 2 weeks ago. We just pointed out before, no one's been able to run the ball in Seattle in a month. So how can we put faith in the Cardinals rushing it? I mean, the Seahawks run defense out of nowhere is red hot, which means we have to take a close look at the matchup for Kyler Murray. And right off the bat, I'm not liking what I'm seeing here. Seattle has been generating pressure. They're 11th in pressure rate, 10th in adjusted sack rate. Kyler Murray really struggling with pressure this year. 27th in yards per attempt, 21st in pass rating, 38th in turnover-worthy play rate. Don't like that at all. Seattle's generating pressure, and Kyler Murray cannot handle pressure this year. In the Week 12 matchup on the road in Seattle, check this out. So he attempted 11 passes under pressure in that game, Kyler Murray. He was 2 of 11, 29 yards, no touchdowns, a pick, a 1.7 passer rating. So this Seattle pass rush definitely won the battle in that Week 12 matchup. And like I said, they've been generating some consistent pressure. They sacked Kyler Murray 5 times in the game. 5 sacks. Something else I like for Seattle's defense here is they've done a good job this year taking away those underneath throws. They're 6th in DVOA against the short pass. Kyler Murray likes to throw a lot of those. 46.6% of his pass attempts this year have been considered short passes. To give this Seahawks defense problems, you're going to want to throw the ball downfield, and that's not really what Arizona does. I'm not saying they're not capable of it, but Arizona wants to run the ball and take those underneath throws. So I like that matchup for the Seahawks defense here. Also, Seattle running a lot of man coverage recently. On the season, they're 10th in man coverage frequency, but in their last 4 games since we've seen the defense heat up, they're 4th in man coverage frequency. So Mike McDonald running some more man coverage recently. The reason I'm bringing that up, Kyler Murray much better against zone. Actually, he's got some pretty ugly looking passing numbers against man coverage. So I really don't like this matchup for Kyler Murray. Even though he's back at home, I don't like the matchup for Kyler Murray. I'm loving this new Seahawks defense. So when it comes to betting this game, I'm going to be on the Seattle side. I see a Seahawks +3. I like that. Also, Arizona team total under 23.5 might be something I invest in. I'll let you know on the live show what I end up doing, but it'll definitely be either Seahawks +3 or Arizona team total under next game. Chicago on the road in San Francisco. We got the 49ers laying 3 or 3.5, depending on your sports book. Total sitting at 43.5 pretty much across the board. Take a look at the pie charts, and according to the data, action's coming in on the Chicago side. Over 70% of the tickets, just over 55% of the money. As I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So let's get into this matchup, and we'll start with an ugly-looking trend if you're a Chicago Bears fan. This game is on the road, which means the Bears will be searching for their first road win. They're 0-5 this year on the road, just 1-3-1 against the number. Betting the Bears on the road has not been a profitable decision to make this year. The good news is they're playing a 49ers team that's just crushed with injuries right now. I mean, there's still no Nick Bosa. There's no Hargrave. They got a couple question marks at linebacker. Actually, Hufanga might be back at safety, so it'll be good for the 49ers to get him back. I feel like I haven't seen Hufanga play in a year. But yeah, so he's listed as questionable. He has been practicing, so maybe Hufanga's back, but he hasn't played in a while, so I'm not sure how much of an impact he has immediately. First game back joining the team, so 49ers definitely dealing with some injuries on both sides of the ball. That being said, Bears offense is a little banged up themselves. DeAndre Swift listed as questionable. DJ Moore listed as questionable. Both those guys did participate in light practice on Friday, so I would assume both of them will be out there. We'll have to wait and see, though. So what do we think about the 49ers defense right now? Well, obviously, last week was a disgrace. I mean, they got absolutely smoked. I bet the over in the game, but I also put a few dollars on the 49ers +6.5. 49ers got crushed. They gave up 35 points, 7.1 yards per play, over 54% success rate. I think we can all agree, like, on the road against the Bills in a blizzard, not exactly the best spot, probably a meaningless data point, not much to take away from that. That being said, in the 4 games before that, they were allowing 25.5 points per game. 5.1 yards per play actually isn't bad. So it's not like they're getting cooked with these big plays, but look at the success rate. 49.5%. So the 49ers defense struggling to get off the field. Will that continue here? Well, Caleb Williams actually is on an upswing. We've seen such a roller coaster season from Caleb Williams so far this year. In weeks 8 through 10 was definitely a downswing of the roller coaster. Just 4.9 yards per attempt, an average passer rating of 63.9. But in his last 3 games, all division games, over 275 passing yards per game, 61%. Success rate per dropback, an average passer rating of 99.5. So Caleb Williams seems to be trending back in the right direction again. As far as the matchup goes for Caleb Williams, I definitely don't love the look of this graphic right here. The weakness of this 49ers defense in terms of passing depth has been the intermediate pass. The reason I don't love that is Caleb Williams doesn't have the best numbers throwing to that depth. He's been pretty efficient throwing the short pass. 49ers pretty good in that passing depth. The thing is, I mean, a lot of this data has those terrible Caleb Williams games included. So I'm not sure how much to take away from this. He's definitely playing on a whole nother level right now. Same goes for this. I mean, you look at these numbers right here. The 49ers don't blitz. They're 31st in blitz rate. Caleb Williams actually much better when blitzed. When you don't blitz him, he has some terrible numbers. But again, A lot of those are probably from earlier in the season when he was still developing. He's still developing now. The current 49ers defensive front is not generating a lot of pressure, which I guess is good news for Caleb Williams, but it's not like he's been lighting it up from a clean pocket. But, I mean, the numbers are better. Yards per attempt, 5.4 to 6.7. So he should have some clean pockets to throw from in this game without Nick Bosa out there, without Hargrave out there. 49ers actually not generating a ton of pressure. And in terms of running ball, this is crazy. I actually think Chicago might be able to run the ball a little bit in this game. I'm saying a little bit. This 49ers defense has no answers for the run game. In their last 4 games, they're allowing 149 rushing yards per game, 4.69 yards per carry, 46.6% success rate per rush. Not that the Bears are doing anything on the ground, but this 49ers run defense is not very good. That dates back multiple years, even last year when they were healthy. Well, they were actually injured a little bit last year as well, but even last year, they were struggling against the run. And check this out. Chicago runs primarily gap concept blocking schemes, plays directly into the weakness of the 49ers defense. So as crazy as this sounds, I think the Bears are going to be able to run the ball a little bit on the road here. I know it's crazy, but I do think they're going to be able to run the ball a little bit. Don't love the matchup for Caleb Williams. I still do trust the 49ers secondary a bit. So I don't know if Caleb Williams does much here on the road, but I do think the Bears will be able to move the chains here and there. So what do we think about the matchup on the other side? Well, we got the 49ers offense, and looking at these two graphics, it looks like a favorable matchup for San Francisco. They're 3rd in the NFL in yards per play, 13th in success rate. The Bears defense, 23rd and 10th. Here's the thing. The 49ers offense, as I'm sure you already know, even more injured than the defense. Still no Trent Williams, still no Aaron Banks, no Christian McCaffrey, no Jordan Mason, no Brandon Ayuk. 49ers offense is a shell of itself right now. Also, the strength of the Chicago pass defense taking away those underneath throws. If you want to throw the ball in this Bears defense, you're probably going to want to throw the ball downfield. That's the weakness in terms of passing depth. They're 21st in DVOA against the deep pass. Brock Purdy, without Brandon Ayuk, not much of a downfield passing threat this year. I mean, I'm sure not having Brandon Ayuk's a huge part of that. His numbers throwing the deep pass aren't that efficient. So I actually don't like that for Brock Purdy. And actually, the matchup for Brock Purdy gets even worse than that. Bears run a lot of single high safeties. Actually, over 60% of their defensive looks are single high safeties, 5th most in the NFL. Brock Purdy, better looking numbers against 2 high safeties, against single high, 8th, 17th, and 24th. Also, this game is at home where Brock Purdy's been significantly worse this year. On the road, he's averaging over 262 passing yards per game, 9 yards per attempt, over 62% success rate per dropback, over 113 passer rating. Brock Purdy's still been a beast on the road, but at home in San Francisco, he's been throwing picks, a 79.7 passer rating, has not played his best football at home. Also, we all know the history with Brock Purdy, with and without Trent Williams on the field. This is the numbers from last year. Brock Purdy played 4 games without Trent Williams last year. In those games, he had 3 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. In the 12 games with Trent Williams on the field, 28 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. So this guy definitely makes a difference. And check this out. Look at his numbers when pressured last year without Trent Williams on the field. Brock Purdy under pressure, 1 touchdown, 5 interceptions, a 10.8% turnover-worthy play rate, a 45.7 passer rating, significantly better when Trent Williams on the field. So when Trent Williams is on the field. So no question, this guy being out is a huge deal here for San Francisco. Keep in mind, this is a Bears pass rush that's pretty damn good. This is probably a top 10 pass rush here. They're 3rd in pressure rate, 13th in pass rush grade, 16th in adjusted sack rate. So missing the entire left side of the offensive line. Yeah, not good. Not good at all for the San Francisco 49ers. Now, if you are looking for some good news, if you are trying to lay the 3 of the 3.5 with San Francisco, you can point at the fact that Brock Purdy actually has done a decent job handling pressure this season. 8th in pressure to sack rate, 12th in yards per attempt, 6th in passer rating. Now, a lot of those games were with Trent Williams, obviously. So that's some good news if you're looking to bet the 49ers. Also, Bears run a lot of zone coverage, 74% of the time, 8th in zone coverage frequency. Brock Purdy has been better against zone coverage, so I guess there's another positive angle if you're looking to bet the 49ers. But to be honest, there's way more negative angles here for Brock Purdy than there are positive angles. Now, in terms of the 49ers running the ball in this game, obviously, as I'm sure you know, there's no Christian McCaffrey. There's also no Jordan Mason. So when we pull up this graphic right here, the 49ers run game has actually been better without Christian McCaffrey in weeks 1 through 9 and week 13. Obviously, we know that the 49ers rushing attack is not better without Christian McCaffrey, but it's important to point out that most of those games were played with Jordan Mason. So no Jordan Mason as well definitely could be an issue for the 49ers. Now, you might be thinking, who cares? The Bears can't stop the run. and you're not wrong, except for last week on the road in Detroit. Yeah, they got ran all over. If you look at the 3 games before that, it's really not that bad. I mean, 125.3 rushing yards allowed per game, 4.4 yards per carry, 38.4% success rate per rush is actually pretty good. Look, by no means am I trying to tell you that the Bears have a good run defense. I'm just saying it hasn't been practical joke bad. And the 49ers with the battered offensive line, missing the RBs, I don't really trust San Francisco to run the ball much. I mean, I'm sure they'll move the chains here and there. It is the Bears' run defense, but I don't have a lot of faith in the 49ers moving the ball up and down the field on the ground, and I don't like the matchup for Brock Purdy. So where does that leave me in terms of placing a bet? I mean, that's a good question, man. I thought this was going to be a good time to buy low and finally buy in on this 49ers team. -3. I was waiting for it. I was going to jump on it. But the more I look into this game, the more I'm starting to think that I just can't bet this 49ers team. I also am not trying to back the Bears on the road. I do think this is a rough matchup for Brock Purdy, and I think the Bears defense can show up. And I think the same thing about the 49ers defense. I mean, I think the Bears will run the ball a little bit. So I guess I would say under 44, maybe 49ers team total under, maybe Bears plus 3.5. Those would be my 3 picks for the game. Bears plus 3.5, under 44, 49ers team total under. As of right now, I don't have a bet on the game, but I'm going to be looking at stuff all night. I'll let you know on the live show in the morning if I end up placing anything, but those are my 3 picks as of right now. Next game. All right, like I said, Bills are on the road in this one. Rams catching 4.5 points at home. I do see a couple 5s out there. Total sitting at 49.5. I do see a couple 49s. So either 49.5 or 49, depending on your sports book. Let's take a quick look at the pie charts. And according to the data, as you probably would have guessed, action's coming in pretty heavily on the Buffalo side. Over 75% of the tickets, about 90% of the money. As I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So let's get into this matchup, and we'll start with the Bills offense against the Rams defense. Quick look at this graphic. It obviously looks like a very favorable matchup for Buffalo offensively. Although we do have to give the Rams some credit. They're definitely playing better defense as of late. But still, this is Josh Allen and the Bills offense. This is a tough matchup for any defense. On the season, the Bills are 8th in yards per play, 7th in success rate. On the season, the Rams defense 23rd in yards per play allowed, 24th in success rate. And if we're talking about the Rams defense playing better football as of late, we also have to mention that the Bills offense has been on an absolute warpath. In their last 7 games, they're averaging 30.4 points per game, 6.4 yards per play, almost 55% success rate. No one can seem to stop this Buffalo Bills offense right now. We know it's an offense that wants to run the ball, 7th in run frequency, and the Rams defense actually 30th in opponent run frequency. So the Bills want to run the ball, and Rams opponents have been running the ball on them all season. Not a great look there for LA. Quick look at this graphic here. It looks like the Bills offensive line should have the edge, but like I said, the Rams defensive front has definitely been better as of late. We'll talk about it in a second. But the Bills offensive line 2nd in adjusted line yards, 15th in run blocking grade, 14th in yards before contact. The Rams defensive line 24th, 16th, and 27th. Now, if we pull up the Rams game logs from their last 6 games, it kind of looks like the run defense might be starting to trend downward a little bit. In weeks 8 through 10, out of nowhere, this Rams defensive front was excellent against the run. 3.26 yards per carry allowed, success rate per rush under 29%, just 80.3 rushing yards allowed per game. That was against the Dolphins, the Seahawks, and the Vikings, so it's not like they played trash. Played some decent teams there. They were shutting the run down. In the 3 games since, 5.62 yards per carry, 194.7 rushing yards allowed per game. So you might look at this graphic and think, we can't trust the Rams run defense anymore. They're starting to trend in the wrong direction. And I get it, but the thing is that Eagles game, they ran for like 320 yards, kind of skewing these numbers. If you look at the Rams' last 5 games, well, it's actually the last 6 games minus the Philadelphia game, they have excellent numbers against the run. 3.77 yards per carry, 30.4% success rate per rush. So there was just one game where the Eagles ran the ball all over the Rams. Other than that, they've been playing great defense against the run for 5 straight games now. And this Bills rushing attack with James Cook, it's definitely good, but it's not nearly as efficient as the Eagles rushing attack with Saquon Barkley. So I don't think it's crazy to think this Rams defensive front at home is able to at least limit the Bills run game, which means we really need to take a look at the matchup for Josh Allen. Well, right off the bat here, we know the Rams secondary struggles against the deep pass. It's the weakness of this Rams team, has been for most of the season. Josh Allen does throw the deep ball. 13.5% of his pass attempts are considered deep passes, so not a great look there for the Rams defense. Just a 77.4 passer rating when throwing the deep passes though, so there's something. But regardless, there should be some opportunities for Josh Allen to make some big throws down the field in this one. Now, what about the Rams pass rush? Because we know this is the strength of the team. They're 12th in blitz rate, 6th in pressure rate, 21st in adjusted sack rate. Here's the thing. We're looking at Josh Allen's numbers under pressure, and they look pretty good. 3rd in pressure to sack rate. He does not take sacks. 9th in yards per attempt, 8th in pass rating, 33rd in turnover-worthy play rate. So you might look at that and think, oh shit, Josh Allen's about to throw some picks in this game. Here's the thing. Josh Allen kind of fixed that. Early in the season, in weeks 1 through 6, he had a 9% turnover-worthy play rate. That was 32nd amongst qualified quarterbacks at that time. And we were all looking at his numbers. He only had, I believe, 1 or 2 interceptions at the time. And those of us that look at these numbers, we were all like, the interceptions are coming for Josh Allen. He's got a crazy turnover-worthy play rate. He's getting lucky. But here's the thing. Since week 7, Josh Allen is taking much better care of the football. 2.9% turnover-worthy play rate. That's actually top 10 in the NFL. So the whole Josh Allen crazy turnover-worthy play rate, the interceptions are coming. You've probably heard it if you watch NFL content on YouTube. I think that's kind of dead. He's been protecting the football lately. So as a whole, I'm not really worried about the Rams pass rush here. It's a good pass rush. They got a lot of really young talent there on the defensive front, but Josh Allen has excellent numbers under pressure. He's doing a much better job protecting the football. So I think he'll be fine. Rams pass rush does not scare me here. So next, why don't we take a look at the Rams coverages, see if it's a favorable matchup for Josh Allen. Rams run a pretty balanced offense, 10th in zone frequency, 7th in cover 3. So they run a decent amount of cover 3. Josh Allen actually slightly better numbers against man. 22nd in completion percentage, 10th in yards per attempt, 5th in pass rating against man coverage. Against zone, 24th, 20th, and 25th. So all right, there's something if you're looking to bet the Rams. They run a lot of zone coverage. Josh Allen, not the best numbers against zone coverage. What about specifically against cover 3, which is by far the most frequent coverage for the Rams? Josh Allen, not elite looking numbers here. 17th in completion percentage, 17th in yards per attempt, 23rd in passer rating. So another somewhat favorable angle for the Rams here. If you're looking to take the points with the Rams, you can point at the coverages. Not the greatest matchup for Josh Allen. He's actually struggled a little bit against cover 3. But is that enough for me to put my money on the Rams defense making stops against Josh Allen and the Bills offense? And honestly, I think the answer to that question would have to be no. There should be opportunities, like I said before, for Josh Allen to connect on some big plays. Maybe the Rams are able to limit the run a little bit, but as a whole, this offense is just too red hot right now. I expect Josh Allen to be able to make some throws. Maybe not an offensive explosion, maybe not the 34, 35-point performances we've been seeing, but I do think the Bills are going to connect on some big plays. But what about the matchup on the other side? Let's take a look at the matchup for the Rams offense. These two units looking pretty even on paper here. Rams offensively, 14th in yards per play, 6th in success rate. Bills defensively, 13th in yards per play allowed, 12th in success rate. So like I said, pretty even here on paper, maybe slight advantage for the Rams offense. And we do have to mention that the Rams are playing their best offensive football right now. The run game has finally arrived. Kyren Williams is finally here. In their last 3 games, over 120 rushing yards per game, 5.5 yards per carry, almost 51% success rate per rush. The run game has finally arrived for the Rams. We've been waiting for it all year. The offensive line was banged up for most of the season. Finally healthy. Kyren Williams finally running the ball. And that is not great news if you're a Bills fan. That plays directly into the weakness of this Bills defense. This graphic just shows the last 4 games, but this dates back to last season. The weakness of this Bills defense has always been stopping the run. On their last 4 games, 5.2 yards per carry allowed, 125.5 rushing yards allowed per game, 40.7% success rate per rush isn't bad, but no question, this is the weakness of the Bills defense, stopping the run. Now, to be fair to the Bills, we do have to mention that Matt Milano is back. He came back last week against the 49ers. I feel like I haven't seen Matt Milano play in years, but he is finally back. He was back last week against the 49ers, so maybe having a healthy Matt Milano back on the field helps with the Bills' run defense, but still, the way the Rams have been running the football these last 3 games, I have to think they're going to be able to run it a little bit. This run game with a healthy offensive line looks pretty damn good. So that brings us to Matt Stafford. I do think he's going to have a little run support, like I said. Do we like the matchup for Matt Stafford? And I got to say, I like this graphic right here. Buffalo sits back in coverage a lot, kind of similar to Green Bay. They will give you the underneath throws. The reason I like that for Matt Stafford is he loves taking those underneath throws. 50.1% of Matt Stafford's pass attempts are considered short passes. That's an A+, meaning towards the top of the NFL in frequency. He loves throwing those underneath throws. The Bills defense will give you those all day. So are we possibly looking at a dink and dunk fest here from the Rams offense. So let's take a look at the Bills coverage. They're 7th in zone frequency. They're kind of balanced, run a lot of cover 4, a lot of cover 6, a lot of cover 3, a lot of cover 2. They pretty much spread it out. They do run a ton of 2 high safety looks though. 7th in zone frequency, 4th in 2 high safety frequency. So how does Stafford match up against those coverages? Well, good news for the Rams, he's been better against zone coverage, and it actually plays into the type of football we expect to see here from the Rams. Check this out. Completion percentage against man, 26th. Against zone coverage, 6th. But yards per attempt is actually better against man coverage, meaning when he sees man coverage, he connects on some bigger plays. When he sees zone coverage, he tends to take more of those underneath throws. Yards per attempt is worse, but completion percentage and passer rating is better. So this even further confirms my suspicion that we're going to see a dink and dunk fest here from the Rams offense. And look at Stafford's numbers against 2 high safeties. Same thing. Completion percentage way better. Yards per attempt is the same, so less big plays, more completions, higher passer rating. So like I said, I keep saying this, dink and dunk fest here from Stafford against the Bills defense, and he should have some success with it. Now, obviously, we need to answer this question right here. Is Matt Stafford healthy? Because if Matt Stafford's not playing in this game, then pretty much throw out everything I've been talking about for the last 90 seconds. None of it applies. From what I'm reading, he's fine. I mean, he's listed on the injury report. He's listed as questionable, but from what I'm reading, he's not in danger of not playing. So hopefully by the time you're watching this, I'm recording this on Tuesday night. I'm recording this early. So hopefully by the time you're watching this, everything's good to go with Matt Stafford. I think he's going to play. And if he plays, I mean, like I said before, the Rams are playing their best offensive football right now. In the last 3 games, over 240 passing yards per game. Now, the yards per game is the same in the first 9 games, but look at yards per attempt. 7 in the first 9 games, 8.3 in the last 3 games. Passer rating in the first 9 games, 87, 119 in the last 3 games. So not only have the Rams seemed to have found their run game in the last 3 games, but passing attack looks a lot more efficient as well. So if Stafford is 100% healthy, I think he's going to connect on a ton of underneath throws, and I think the Rams are going to be able to sustain drives in this game. I think they're going to be able to score points on the Bills. So I actually like the matchup for the Rams offense here. So right now you might be thinking, all right, Kyle, based on everything you just said, you think the Rams are going to be able to run the ball. You think Stafford's going to complete a lot of those underneath throws, and they're going to be able to move the football. Why haven't you pulled the trigger on Rams plus 4.5? I'm in the Discord. I don't see any open tickets for you on this game. Why haven't you pulled the trigger on Rams plus 4.5? Well, I will tell you why. This scares the shit out of me here. The Rams play a road game in San Francisco 4 days after this. So after this game against the Bills, one of the biggest games of the season for the Rams is 4 days later. And I hate the shit out of that. So even though I like this matchup for the Rams at home, catching a good number, plus 4.5, even though I like that, I haven't pulled the trigger on it because the spot scares the hell out of me. So my pick for this game is Rams plus 4.5. I would also lean over, but because of the spot, this might end up being a pass for me. I mean, I'll let you know as the week progresses. Obviously, I'll let you know in the live show. But as of right now, it's Rams or pass, over or pass. Now, if you're looking to play a prop, now none of the prop markets are open yet. Maybe Kyron Williams or Colby Parkinson over receptions. I know that sounds crazy. Both of these guys do all of their receiving damage via the short pass. And we just talked about how it's going to be a possible dink and dunk fest. Well, Kyron Williams and Colby Parkinson, all their damage comes via short passes. So maybe Kyron Williams over receptions, Colby Parkinson over receptions. You guys know I'm not a prop guy, but I honestly think that might be worth a look. Maybe Matt Stafford over completions as well. So maybe I'll throw a prop down in this game. But as of right now, Rams are pass, over a pass, or some receptions or completion props. That's how I'm feeling about this game. Chargers are on the road in Arrowhead. Sunday night football. Chiefs are now laying 4. It looks like all the 3.5s are gone. Total sitting at 42.5 or 43, depending on your sports book. Take a quick look at the pie charts, and according to the data, action seems to be coming in on the Charger side. 65% of the tickets, about 65% of the money. As I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So let's get into this matchup, and we'll start right here. The Chiefs' elite run defense against the Chargers' offensive line that's not creating a ton of space in the run game. 26th in adjusted line yards, 10th in run blocking grade. Chiefs top 10, even top 5 across the board here. So at a quick glance, we might think there's no way the Chargers can run the ball in this game. I do have to say, though, after a dark couple months, it does look like the Chargers run game may be coming back around. In weeks 8 through 13, 4.6 yards per carry, over 110 rushing yards per game. Compare that to weeks 3 through 7 where they couldn't do anything on the ground. Definitely a big improvement. Now, the success rate is still terrible, 31.1%. So they're not really moving the chains on the ground, but at least they're getting some production. Obviously, there's still no J.K. Dobbins. I'm not expecting a rushing explosion here by the Chargers, but we do need to point out that this Chiefs defense is definitely trending in the wrong direction here. In weeks 1 through 7, they're allowing just 17.2 points per game, 47% success rate, 5.5 yards per play actually aren't even good. But in weeks 8 through 13, we're up to 22 points per game, 6 yards per play, almost 49% success rate. So like I said, the Chiefs defense definitely trending in the wrong direction. Look at their numbers against the pass, 222.3 passing yards allowed per game, up to 248 yards per attempt from 6.7 to 7.5. And now this is what I want to point out right here, their numbers against the run. We know the Chiefs to be one of the best run defenses in the NFL. In weeks 3 through 10, 70.3 rushing yards allowed per game, 3.3 yards per carry, 25.1% success rate per rush. That being said, look at the last 3 games. 102.3 rushing yards allowed per game, over 4 yards per carry, 43.8% success rate per rush. The Chiefs have been getting run on a little bit. And if you're thinking, they just probably played a tough stretch of schedule, dude, it's the Panthers and the Raiders. The Bills are in there too, so obviously the Bills can run the ball, but the Panthers and the Raiders were running the ball on this Chiefs defense. So maybe not the elite run defense their season-long numbers claim they are. Maybe the Chargers can run the ball a little bit, and that's a huge maybe, because if they are able to run the ball even a little bit, even 3.8, 3.9 yards per carry, that means Justin Herbert is going to be able to utilize the play action, which he loves to do. Justin Herbert is 3rd in play action frequency in the NFL, and amongst 42 qualified quarterbacks, he's one of the best in the league at it in terms of efficiency throwing the ball out of play action. 5th, 8th, 1st, 3rd, 9th, 10th. That's a completion percentage, yards per attempt. I'm not going to read all the categories, but he's a top 10, even top 5 quarterback across the board out of the play action. How has the Chiefs defense been against play action so far this year? Well, actually not good. On the season, they're 20th in completion percentage allowed, 26th in passer rating, dead last in pressure rate, dead last in big time throw rate. So the Chiefs have actually been one of the worst defenses in the NFL against the play action. Justin Herbert 3rd in play action frequency. If they're able to run the ball and use the play action, this actually might be a favorable matchup for Justin Herbert here on the road. And check this out. What has Justin Herbert been doing a lot of the last few weeks? Throwing the ball downfield. 14% of his pass attempts this season are considered deep passes, and look at the efficiency numbers. He's very good at it. That plays directly into the weakness of this Chiefs defense. They're 26th in the NFL in DVOA against the deep pass. So another favorable angle there for Justin Herbert. Another angle I like for Justin Herbert in this one is it's not just the Chiefs run defense that's trending in the wrong direction. The pass rush is starting to go downhill as well. In weeks 1 through 10, they led the NFL in time to pressure, in time getting to the quarterback. In the last 3 games, they're back to 17th. They're 29th in the NFL in pressure rate on the year, but that's because teams treat the Chiefs pass rush kind of like the Steelers. They draw up game plans specifically to get the ball out quickly. So 29th in pressure rate doesn't really tell the true story. But no question, in the last 3 weeks, we've seen this Chiefs pass rush start to fall off a little bit as well. The reason that's significant is Justin Herbert, when given a clean pocket, has been a monster. 8th in yards per attempt, 12th in pass rating, 15th in turnover-worthy play rate. So is this a good matchup for Justin Herbert here? It's starting to look like it. Now, if you are laying the points with the Chiefs in this one, I do have a couple angles you'll like for the defense. First off, the Chiefs run a lot of man coverage, a lot of too high safety frequency. 6th in man coverage frequency, 3rd in too high safety frequency. Justin Herbert's been much better against zone coverage this year. He's actually struggled against man coverage. Maybe that's missing his receivers from last year. But 33rd in completion percentage, 25th in yards per attempt, 29th in passer rating against man coverage. 9th in big time throw rate, though. So those downfield plays, those big plays through the air, they've still been there against man coverage. And also, like I said, Chiefs run a lot of too high safety looks. Justin Herbert's been, I don't want to say much better, but he's definitely been better against single high safety looks. So not all great here for Justin Herbert and the Chargers offense. And by the way, this Chargers offense hasn't looked all that great in the last couple games. I mean, they were on a warpath there in week 7 through 11, averaging 25.8 points per game, almost 7 yards per play. Last couple of games, just 20 points per game, 5.4 yards per play. Now, success rate is above 45%, and that Falcons game, maybe a little bit of an asterisk there. It was a terrible spot on a short week flying across the country against a Falcons team that was rested off a bye week. Pretty terrible spot for the Chargers in that one. But no question, we're seeing a huge drop-off in the passing production. In weeks 7 through 11, Justin Herbert might have been the most productive quarterback in the NFL, or the most efficient, I should say. 9.1 yards per attempt. I mean, look at the left side of this graphic. Last couple weeks, passing production is down. So if you're looking to bet the Chiefs, you're definitely looking at that, thinking the Chargers offense is trending in the wrong direction. Personally, it was the Ravens game on primetime and then the Falcons in a terrible spot. I like the Chargers offense to bounce back. I like what I was seeing there during that stretch. I think Justin Herbert's going to be able to utilize the play action. I think to be able to run the ball a little bit. I think the Chargers will move the ball in this one. But what about the matchup on the other side? Let's take a look at Kansas City's offense here. We know the story with this Chiefs offense. They're elite at staying on the field. Success rate, right? They move the chains. They're second in success rate. Here's the thing. They may have met their match here because the Chargers defense is elite at getting off the field. 5th in success rate, 3rd in success rate per dropback. So this new look Chargers defense under Harbaugh, maybe not the best matchup for Patrick Mahomes here. And the Chargers defense is coming off an elite performance against the Falcons. That's the reason they won that game. This is coming from someone that had Atlanta as one of my top bets. The Chargers offense didn't do much at all. Falcons defense played great, but Kirk Cousins was terrible. The Chargers defensive front was dominant, letting up just 13 points, 4.8 yards per play. And if you're a Chargers fan, that was sight for sore eyes because it was looking like this Chargers defense was definitely trending in the wrong direction hard in the 3 games before that. Tennessee, Cincinnati, Baltimore, 6.6 yards per play. So to see him fly across the country and put out a great defensive performance last week on the road in Atlanta, you definitely love to see it if you're a Chargers fan. I mean, look at their numbers specifically against the pass. 40 passer rating. That's what they held Kirk Cousins to. That's because he threw a baker's dozen interceptions, but just 6.3 yards per attempt. Chargers defense looked great last week, and an angle I really like for the Chargers defense here, I actually like this a lot. What have we seen from Patrick Mahomes so far this season? A lot of short passes, right? He just moves the chains. Not a ton of downfield throws. In fact, just 7.3% of his pass attempts this year would be considered deep passes. Not a lot. He throws a lot of short passes. He moves the chains, right? He gets the ball underneath. That happens to be what the Chargers are elite at this year. On the season, they're first in DVOA against a short pass. You definitely don't like to see that if you're a Chiefs fan. Chargers are elite at taking away what the Chiefs are trying to do. If you want to throw the ball in this Chargers defense, you're going to want to throw the ball downfield. Not that Mahomes can't do that. He just hasn't done a lot of it this year. Also, if you look at the Chiefs' recent schedule, they have seen a lot of bad defenses recently. Check this out. So they played the Raiders, 25th in defensive DVOA. The Panthers, 30th. Before that, you got the Broncos and the Broncos and the Bills. Before that, both top 10. They're 5th and 7th. Before that, 20th, 25th. Before that, the 49ers, 9th. The reason I read it off like that is in the last 7 games, the Chiefs have played 4 teams in the bottom 12 in defensive rating, 3 teams in the top 10. If you just isolate Patrick Mahomes' numbers from those 3 games against top 10 defenses, 6 yards per attempt, an average pass rating of 75.4, sure, 58.1% success rate per dropback. He's still moving the chains, but the stats are ugly. We're not seeing a ton of passing production out of Patrick Mahomes in these recent games against tough defenses. Chargers are definitely sitting in the top 10 in defensive rating right now. So at this point, I'm thinking I'm definitely taking the Chargers, right? I'm getting more than a field goal. Mahomes hasn't looked great against these good defenses. I like the matchup for Justin Herbert. Here's where I get a bit worried about the Chargers. And if you're betting Kansas City, you're probably looking at this. It looks like the Chiefs' run game is starting to come back to life. In the last 3 games, 5.3 yards per carry, 40% success rate per rush. And I know you're thinking that's not very good. Look at the right side of this graphic. Those numbers are disgusting. In the 3 games before that, 3.3 yards per carry, 33.2% success rate per rush. So the Chiefs' run game is trending in the wrong direction, and the reason I think that's crucial, Chargers' run defense is starting to fall off with the injuries. Remember, there's still no Perryman at inside linebacker. He's still out. In the last 5 games, they're allowing 4.6 yards per carry, 130.2 rushing yards per game. Now, the Chiefs do tend to run more gap concept blocking schemes, which actually plays into the strength of the Chargers defense. So there's something, but I truly think the Chiefs are going to be able to run the ball in this game. Like I said, there's still no Perryman. Henley is off the injury report. He was listed as questionable last week, so I guess that's something, but still no Perryman out there. I think the Chiefs might be able to run the ball, but still, is that enough to lay more than a field goal here? I don't like that they have some extra rest as far as a Chargers bet. I definitely don't like that. So I haven't placed this bet yet, but I'm leaning towards Chargers. I also think the game goes over. I think we may see Justin Herbert connect on a big play or two, and I think the Chiefs are going to be able to keep the chains moving. So I think the game goes over the total. I'll let you know on the live show. As of right now, Chargers +4 and over. That's the way I'm looking in this game. Yeah, live show 11 a.m. Eastern time. That's all the time I have. I can't get to any more. Live show 11 a.m. Eastern time. We'll go through every single game. I'll let you know all the final decisions. If you're able to make it, we'd love to see you in the comments. If you want to go see what all the bets are that I have open right now, head over to KyleKirms.com and click on Open Bets. You'll see all mine as well as everyone else on the staff here. Let's have ourselves a good Sunday. Please remember to bet responsibly. Talk to you in the Discord.